Okay, this video is called a big paradigm shift in gaming. We can watch it while I'm eating my food here. A little break from leveling. I haven't seen this video yet, but if I had to assume, he's probably going to talk about Ubisoft. See what Esfand has to say about a big paradigm shift in gaming. I'm curious about what he has to say about this, because I have a lot of thoughts.
Hi guys, it's me again, and today we're going to talk about everybody's favorite AAA gaming. We're going to look at where it's been, why it exists right now, and where I think it's going, which is going to be the majority of them into the garbage. I've said this before, that if you build 100 bridges and you suck one you're not a bridge builder, you're a sucker. But if you suck 100 and you only build one bridge, you're Ubisoft. And the problem now is that we've got a lot of companies like that because they focus so much on trying to make these games and focusing on making them the most broad audience possible, making them have everything for everyone, that we get to a situation where one size fits none. And I think this has been an ongoing issue. It's been going on, I think, especially in the last 10 years.
Okay, I love that he says this, because this is how I felt about WoW whenever I quit. Around the time that I quit WoW originally, like in retail WoW, this is kind of how I started feeling about it. I always said they tried to Call of Duty-fy the game, and it was like they literally were trying so hard to appeal to everybody, which is fine. You should have things that kind of appeal to everybody, but they were trying so hard to do it that you were ending up taking away from the experience from different categories of players. And that's what he means by the one size fits none, right?
I think COVID accelerated the goal with this because of how much more money gaming is making now. COVID was kind of like a multiplier effect on that, but it's been going on for a while, and I want to explain kind of where AAA gaming came from, because back in the day, we're talking about the 90s, even the 80s, right, with arcades and the original consoles, but the 90s and the 2000s and a little bit into the 2010s.
What's up, Thor? How's it going, dude?
Not all the ways, as we all know, is that AAA gaming was a stamp of approval, a seal of quality, and it's funny now because it's almost the opposite. It's like, well, this is a AAA game, it's coming from this big studio, so we know that it's going to have a number of annoying features. There's probably going to be, you buy the game on Steam and then you have to log on to their additional launcher in order to actually play it. All of these very, very annoying things.
Great, dude.
And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people don't enjoy that.
Yeah, and super fun.
The other big issue...
PoE was super, super fun. No, I mean, I think Esfand is 100% right here. And it's not necessarily that, it's kind of dumb. And I know he's saying it's almost the opposite now. I do think it's kind of dumb to just, write off something entirely because, oh, it's a big studio making a game. Or oh, it's an indie game. Same thing, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of good game devs out there. There's a lot of people out there that know what the hell they're doing. And sometimes people don't know that they know what the hell they're doing. If you look at a game like Vanilla WoW, I'm going to use that as an example because we're playing WoW lately. A lot of the design decisions made in Vanilla WoW were on purpose. There were also a lot of very good design decisions made in Vanilla WoW that were completely on accident. And different devs have said that multiple times. And it was this, a happy little accident that ended up being really good. And sometimes you don't really know if you're good at something or you can do something until you just try to do it. That's why you're starting to get more and more with the accessibility to being able to either self-publish or, going to an indie games publisher like a Mad Mushroom or an Off-Brand Games. You have a solo or a small team of developers have the ability to be able to push their games out there that you didn't have in the past. And just having people being able to go and make games and do what they love, that being their passion. I really want to make video games. That's something I wanted to do for years, right? That's growing up, all I wanted to do was make video games. Having the capabilities to be able to support yourself in doing that. And it's not perfect, right? It's not perfect. It's not the most lucrative thing in the world. And you really do have to get lucky, right? You are gambling. You're gambling your own time by doing this. But it's possible, right? And if you do have something that's really, really good and it's put in front of the right audience of people, then that thing is going to stick. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to be said about that, right? When you're talking about the difference, or you're talking about AAA games versus indie games, any of that stuff.
That AAA gaming has is that basically a lot of studios, and I think companies are doing this in general. This is something I think that we're also seeing in movies as well, where you're seeing these movies that are being made with these gigantic budgets. Like everything is CGI. There's like all these A-list
We're living the best time in history for this. 100%.
Like, the movie has a budget
100%
of like
Thor.
over $100 million maybe, or something like that. I don't know really what average movie budgets are, but it's probably even more than that in some cases. And then it makes back like a fraction of that money. And the reason what that does is it makes it to where every single movie has to be Spider-Man. Every single movie has to be attached to an IP that can be attached to a line of toys that can be sold to kids. And so now you don't get as many movies that take risks as much because those risks cost more money, and it's
actually a great analogy.
Recoup the money back from the risks because you've lost the market of DVDs. And so this has been going on now for quite a while with movies, and I think video games now are starting to copy the trend. And what you're seeing now is that everything is two. Everything is the next one of something that already previously existed.
It's not just the two, it's the remake, the reboot, you know, movies, games, everything. But this is a two-part or two-pronged problem. And I'll let him finish talking and then I'll say what I have to say about that.
And of course, I mean, I say this, and if you guys can see what I'm playing playing Path of Exile 2, okay? So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but that is kind of what my point is that I think that studios like Grinding Gear Games, studios like Warhorse that are making Kingdom Come Deliverance, and other studios that are the more AA like quality studios, I think that the real future is going to be those studios making the AAA games. It's like instead of a AAA publisher or AAA developer making multiple AAA games, it's going to be one AA publisher, one AA studio making one AAA game. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot more. And
like kind of like a flagship game for a studio. Like, oh yeah, this is the studio that makes Kingdom Come Deliverance. They also have these other games, but that's like their flagship. That's their workhorse. That's their like lead back. Maybe. I don't know. I mean I think that's certainly a possibility. Here's what I was gonna say. I was gonna talk about, and he said he didn't really want to expand on this, but something that he said he didn't want to talk about, but he didn't really want to expand on this. Yes, everything is the sequel. Everything is 2. Everything is the remaster. Everything is the reboot. Whatever it is, right? 3, 4, right? As he has Halo Reach in the background, he's playing Halo 2, or sorry, PoE 2. I think this is a Final Fantasy 14 thing right here, right? Those aren't really sequels, but. It's not just about the studios not wanting to take risks. How many times have you watched a games expo, a game showcase, and a new IP shows up, a new game shows up, and it takes tons of resources, tons of time. It takes everything in the world to be able to make this brand new game. Omega lol, dog shit game. What is this trash? A woman shows up on screen for a second. DI. You know, it's insane. It's absolute insanity. It's the user behavior. It's the player behavior that's part of the problem. Like, people don't know. They like what they know that they like. They know that they like Final Fantasy VII, so they want Final Fantasy VII to be re-released on Steam, mobile, you know, iPhone, Android, iPad, Windows 98, Windows ME, Windows 14, whenever that comes out, whatever it is. Like, they want that, right? They want the HD remaster. They want the remake. They want Rebirth, you know, because they love Final Fantasy VII, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is fine. But a genuine, real issue is those games have that response. But then a new IP shows up and it gets shit on relentlessly. And it's so high risk because people just think everything new is bad. And that's not really fair. It's called nostalgia partially, but it's also good design. People like those games because they are good games. They don't like them just because they played them as a kid. They like them because they are good games. But saying everything new is bad, based. Saying everything new is bad, or anytime a woman shows up on screen, DEI, which, by the way, I am one of the people that thinks like the obsession with DEI is a overall like hindrance. I think it is a negative when you're trying so hard to appeal to everybody that you end up appealing to nobody. I do actually think that's a very real and bad issue. But here's the problem. Whenever you scream DEI at every single ounce of any time you see anything that's not a white male who's like 8-pack abs and jacked and 6'5", don't do that. Stop, because you're now diminishing the impact of the feedback of a very real issue. You're causing noise, and the noise is hiding the facts. The noise is hiding the problems. Who does that though? It's nonstop. It turns into the boy who cried wolf, and then they don't listen to when there's like a real stop. Like when you want to say why are you guys doing this? This game doesn't appeal to anybody, and it's weird, and you're obviously pushing an agenda instead of your agenda being make a good game, because it makes people check out. You're now turning it into, oh, look at what these idiots say. Look at what all these DEI idiots say. The anti-DEI idiots, because they end up pinpointing and picking out individual things. They cherry pick the idiots. Everybody cherry picks the idiots, and they use them as examples. Yeah, bad take. I don't think it's a bad take to say that when you give bad examples of a real issue, that it causes noise that people will use to work against your point. I don't think that's a bad take to say that you shouldn't be doing that. You're doing that now. So I am doing that now by saying that you should have a measured response and give appropriate, proper examples to something so that you can logically break it down and explain to people why something is wrong. That's the opposite of what I'm doing. And it's a huge issue, right?
Enough to have everybody that's
I think I accidentally skipped forward a little bit.
Like quality studios.
So we go back.
I think that the real future is going to be those studios making the AAA games. It's like instead of a AAA publisher or AAA developer making multiple AAA games, it's going to be one AA publisher, one AA studio making one AAA game. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot more. And I think that whenever you really look at, because especially live service games, you have to have such a finger on the pulse of the actual community of the game. You have to have everybody that's working there really understand it. I think that's what Blizzard had back in the 2000s with Warcraft. And if you look at any of the most popular video game franchises, and you look at the people that make the games are usually very good at those games. For example, like the Final Fantasy 16 guy that went and one-shot the boss in front of
2-bite swallow. I'm trying to get it in, dude. Let me go back a little bit. Sorry.
Making one AAA game. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot more. And I think that whenever you really look at, because especially live service games, you have to have such a finger on the pulse of the actual community of the game. You have to have everybody that's working there really understand it. I think that's what Blizzard had back in the 2000s with Warcraft. And if you look at any of the most popular video game franchises, and you look at the people that make the games are usually very good at those games. For example, like the Final Fantasy 16 guy that went and one-shot the boss in front of a big audience before the game came out. That was really cool. And it showed that, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He actually knows how to play his own game, which in some cases, like Diablo 4, turned out to not necessarily be the case. And so anyway, what I think has happened is that you've seen these studios like Ubisoft. I think
let's be fair. Their job is to make the game, not play the game. Okay, let's be fair.
Ubisoft is it's the worst offender, where they're spending $100 million on a game and they're expecting a 20% return. Because would you rather have 20% on $10 million or 20% on $100 million, right? And so that's the logic that they use, that they're going to just spend more money so they can multiply.
Yeah, no, he was just making a joke with Diablo 4.
And I think that what's happening now is that is true, but it's also that you double down on a loss when it's not. And I think that's really the situation that we're seeing a lot of these studios run into when they release a game that's effectively a dud. And I think the reason why these games are getting released and they're trash is because consumer interests are changing so much faster than they used to. So think about it like this. There are a lot of games that are in development for, 6 years.
I'll wait until he finishes.
6 years or 4 years in development is very, very common. Think about how much different things were 4 years ago. Well, 4 years ago, we had COVID. Everything was totally different. People were addicted to Genshin Impact, and everybody was spending all day on the internet. Well, you can't necessarily develop a game around that, that context. And 6 years ago, if you started making a game, well, if you just got inspired by Fortnite, man, you're a little bit late now, aren't you? And so what we're seeing now is that we're seeing smaller studios, these AA studios. I think the best example of this too that you can use besides grinding gear games is Larian, who made Baldur's Gate 3, is that Baldur's Gate 3 took an incredibly long time to make, but it didn't follow any trends because it didn't need to. There were no
Love it. Really good point. It made its own trend. It said, hey, turn-based gaming is back. Hey, turn-based gaming isn't boring. Hey, you can have a story-driven game be turn-based and it's actually really good. Hey, there's actually a lot of nuance and intensity to turn-based gaming. If all D&D, yeah, but that's not, D&D isn't a trend, right? Whereas, and he mentioned this, when you have like these games are taking longer and longer and longer to make over time because, you know, I mean, there's just so many different parts to games now, especially when, you know, we're talking about AAA studios. If there is a popular trend going on, by the time you're like, oh, this trend is happening, let's go make a game at this trend, it's too late. Have you guys noticed how like every year these games expos come around and then you have like, oh, why are there so many space games? Why are there so many arena hero shooters happening at the same time? It's because they use data, they use analytics, they use data, and they use their own expertise at these different studios to try and predict what the trends are going to be. And when a lot of people look at the same data, they'll come to the same conclusions. And they, like all these different studios will make the same types of games at the same time. It's exactly what's happened. I mean, you've had the thing with arena shooters, you had the thing with roguelikes, it's just nonstop. It always happens over and over and over and again. Baldur's Gate 3 also had great DEI too. All the best characters are female. I'm a dude. It was a really sex positive and they knocked it out of the park. Well, no, I mean like, if the game is freaking good, that's all that really matters. That is the bottom line. If the game is freaking good, that is the only thing that matters. That is A. Then when your game is not good, that's whenever everything else becomes the issue. And then if people feel like they're trying to push some kind of agenda and it's a boring story and it's, okay, here we go again. That's what people don't like. That's why people dislike those games. Like, and by the way, I do think it's a huge issue. But like this Siri thing, did you guys see the Siri thing on Twitter? You have like big accounts and stuff tweeting about Siri from The Witcher. And, oh, look how fat they made her. They take one frame out of a trailer. It's the same frame. It's like, dude, stop. You don't care. You act like you care. You're trying to farm engagement. You don't give a damn. You're trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator. You don't care about the anti-DEI shit. All you care about is farming engagement to the lowest common denominator. And I mean, you're trying to make $1 off of it. It's pathetic, right? It's annoying. Stop. If you actually cared, attack the issue and do it with a sound argument. People don't like it when games make their entire identity about their inclusion. That's the issue. Larian didn't make a game about it. It's just natural inclusion. Didn't feel like pandering. Yeah, exactly. They made a damn good game with good story. All the characters had good backstories. All the characters had, I mean, it was whatever, right? Attack the issue with a sound argument and have logic to back it. Don't just be, oh, Siri fat. What DI? Now, there's something, now, how is there a female Witcher? I mean, that is a different thing, right? But Ciri's like a badass character. I mean, even as somebody like, I'm not super invested in this, to be fair. I just get annoyed whenever I'm like, something is obviously not like being intellectually honest. And when you're not being intellectually honest, you're now taking away from your cause. And it's like a huge pet peeve of mine. Yeah, like I like apparently like you can't you can't have a female Witcher because of something or another. And is she a Witcher now or anyway?
Like outside pressures, outside investors, being a public
like you're doing the thing that I'm saying people do.
To, monetize the game in a way that was annoying. It was just them making a good game and then delivering it to players. And I think AAA game studios have, instead of becoming, too big to fail, they've become too big to succeed. And I've said this before, and I think that it becomes increasingly more true every year. And you're seeing these massive studios laying off. Like, I didn't even know this. Ubisoft has 20,000 employees. How do you do that? There are so many people that work probably at these studios that have jobs that are, not particularly, like, super involved with, like, the actual creation of the product. And I think that's very obvious considering that they fire bunches of people and the products keep being made. So the issue is that you have a massive overstaffing, and then you have massive budgets, and then you have massive expectations and a priority system that's created by people who don't actually have the player's interests in mind. And what I'm saying by that is, I think a good example of this is if you look at a lot of the, like video games that have
and people lose their jobs.
Like I think
Sucks.
Senua's Saga 2 is a really great example of a game that is made for an audience of gamers that doesn't really exist. So obviously the game was popular for some people, and there were a good number of people that bought and played the game, but the reality is that it really wasn't that big, and they probably didn't recoup their costs. And what happens is that games journalists and games media, and I think just the games industry itself, likes to gas itself up about these types of games, but I don't actually think that these are the types of things that players are actually looking for. And I think that's reflected in the sales, and this happens over and over and over. People play video games because they like playing video games. While there are exceptions, they are very few and far between. And so what's happened is that these studios have convinced themselves they need to do all these things that players don't really care about, and they do them at the expense of the things that players do really care about, which is replayability, actual play, like playing, like the experience you have playing the game in the minute-to-minute basis. And I think that really another great example of this, I've been playing like on top of like Path of Exile 2, I've also been playing off-stream Stalker 2. And holy shit, that game is great. And it's made by, again, a AA, a smaller studio, but they've come together to really make an incredible game. And I think having a, like a focus, I remember, there was like a really good metaphor that like in Game of Thrones, King Robert was like, what's stronger, 5 armies or 1 army? And like really it's the 1 army that's a lot stronger. And I think that's what we're starting to see a lot more with these games, is you're seeing these studios that are focusing entirely on making one defined product for a defined audience that they have a finger on the pulse of, and they're able to deliver a product to them that meets their needs and exceeds them in a lot of cases. That is the future for games. And I think also what's going to make this even more the future is the fact that you're going to see a lot of these studios, like the layoffs are going to keep happening. And the reason why is because of different types of ways that you can effectively, like, it's not really all AI, but in some cases it is. If you can have one person do the job of 3 people through some sort of procedural generation or some form of technology, well, then you're going to have that happen. And as that happens, it becomes easier and it lowers that bar to entry for the quality that people expect whenever they're paying $70 or $60 for a video game. And so that's where I think AAA gaming is going to go. I think AAA gaming is going to have to become, like, I don't know, they're going to have to scale down. And I feel like there are a few exceptions, right? We're always going to have Rockstar, From Software, Capcom, stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. But I think that many of these other studios are probably going to have to narrow down on one or maybe just a couple of IPs and then develop products for just those IPs rather than trying to release a bunch of different products and just like, well, if we sell 1 million of them for $10, we're going to make $10 million. Well, wow, why don't we sell 1 million of them at $1 million or something like that?
So yeah, I mean, I think this is like a really hard prediction to make. There's a number of factors here, but I think what it's all going to really lead to is, will the definition of what a AAA game is or a AAA game studio is change, and will the idea of AA, AAA, single A, right? Like, will that the idea of these I guess categories of different games and game studios kind of get meshed together over time? I think realistically they probably will. I think reasonably people are going to, and businesses are going to find a way to do things in the most efficient and effective way possible for them to be able to turn profits the way that they need to. In order to be sustainable or profitable, right? Really, I mean, the goal is profitable, right? But to at least be sustainable. And if something's not sustainable, then they're going to stop doing it, right? And then that's, when we mentioned it earlier, unfortunately, like this leads to people losing their jobs, layoffs, all this kind of stuff. And it just sucks, right? A lot of times stuff's completely out of your control and it just happens, right? We saw with off-brand and some things are in your control, some things are not in your control. Some things are, I think in off-brand's case, there was an issue underneath.
Sorry, Esfand, right? But I gotta disagree with you on every front. I'm a huge advocate for DEI, and I don't care who knows. I mean, let's be serious here. Who isn't in favor of driving while extremely intoxicated? It's so fucking awesome. And oh, fuck you, Syracuse.
Syracuse! AA and AAA no longer signalize quality, just cost. Yeah, I mean, it's like the size, right? Maybe that's it. And that's what it is. Like the assumption is that if you have a bigger studio, you have more employees who can work on more things. And by having more employees that can work on more things, you can in turn churn out a better game. That's the idea. But it's not necessarily true, right? And we've seen the success of indie games with solo developers, small teams, and then the whole idea of like a AA studio or whatever. It's like somewhere in between. And yeah, exactly. Sometimes that also ends up being too many cooks.
34 months, Pog.
And when you have too many cooks, that creative vision of what the game should be ends up getting muddied. Where people want to have this in the game, people want to have that in the game, and they end up going in so many different directions, then the game just doesn't work out. And that sucks. Because there are a lot of people that probably know what they're doing there, or they really want something to work, but when you have too many people, it just ends up causing problems, right?
I feel like there are.
Okay, let me scroll back a little bit so I can remember. I was at 1016 was where I was at before.
$760 for a video game, and so that's where I think AAA gaming is going to go. I think AAA gaming is going to have to become like I don't know. They're going to have to scale down. And I feel like there are a few exceptions, right? We're always going to have Rockstar, From Software, Capcom, stuff like that. Yeah, for sure. But I think that many of these other studios are probably going to have to narrow down on one or maybe just a couple of IPs and then develop products for just those IPs rather than trying to release a bunch of different products and just like, well, if we sell 1 million of them for $10, we're going to make $10 million. Well, wow, why don't we sell 1 million of them at $1 million or something like that, right? Some variation of this. And it's just like the idea that, well, we can just keep making more money because there's no sense of market saturation. Well, I think that there's very clearly been a market saturation, hasn't there? And we're seeing that, express itself right now as, you see a lot of games that just don't have the marketing. There's just so much of an economy of attention. There's only so many people that can pay attention to so many games.
There's a bandwidth.
And I think, again, when you have like your story game or whatever that is focused on, motion capturing facial movements, that just doesn't fucking matter to a lot of people. Like, I don't give a shit about that. I don't think a lot of people do. It's nice when the games have it, but I'm certainly not going to play a game because of it. But if a game has good gameplay, I will play a game because of it, even if the face models go like this.
Yeah, like it can be janky.
I don't give a shit. And
if the gameplay of a game is good enough, it's okay if like the graphics aren't the best. It's okay if the animations aren't the best. It's okay if there's like scuff in the game. If the gameplay itself is so good, if the narrative in the game is so good that it enhances the gameplay, that gets you attached to the game. It's okay if it's scuffed. Yeah, classic WoW is a great example. That people want to play good games. People want to play games that play well. People want to play games that gets them invested into a story. I can only care so much about how many pixels that I look at the screen or whatever that I see whenever I look at the screen. I can only care so much.
I don't think most other people do either, except for other journalists and people in the industry. So what we're going to see more of is we're going to see these AA studios that, and I think that another reason why this is happening too is like distribution and publishing. Being able to publish a game, think about how many hoops you had to jump through in order to get your game on Nintendo 64, or in order to get your game on Super Nintendo, or even something like the GameCube. It was much harder to do than now, where all you have to do is, put your game out on Steam and then, post it on Baldi's subreddit. And if the people like it, maybe he'll watch it. And then it'll be on a YouTube clip. It'll get 100,000 views or more. And so that's pretty easy to do, right? Especially compared to, trying to work around, a Japanese company's expectations in the year 2003. Much, much harder to do. And so nowadays, I think you're seeing much more people able to get into that space and grow in that space much more quickly. And that's why you're going to see those AA studios that focus and narrow in on just like that one solid, really good product. That is where I think the future is going to be for AAA games. And I think that also AAA studios, this is another big problem, is that, what I was saying before with Ubisoft, they've sucked a lot of dicks. And the problem now is that residual taste in people's... let's go ahead and just stop right there. People think that their next games are going to be bad because their previous games have been bad. And so there is a reputational damage that happens that exists beyond the lifespan of the game that has problems. And that's effectively what I'm trying to say. And so what I think that we're seeing with Ubisoft and other studios,
I want to listen to that one more
is
time because I couldn't.
Expectations. Much more people.
I got lost for a
nowadays,
second.
I think you're seeing much more people able to get into that space and grow in that space much more quickly, and that's why you're going to see those double A studios that focus and narrow in.
Esfand is back.
Thanks, Tucker Tree. Thanks, man. Thanks for the 23 months,
Push a
dude.
game. Think about how many hoops you had to jump through in order to get your game on Nintendo 64, or in order to get your game on Super Nintendo, or even something like the GameCube. It was much harder to do than now, where all you have to do is, put your game out on Steam,
Right.
and then, post it on Baldi's subreddit, and if the people like it, maybe he'll watch it. And then it'll be in a YouTube clip, it'll get 100,000 views or more. And so that's pretty easy to do, right? Especially compared to, trying to work around, a Japanese company's expectations in the year 2003. Much harder to do.
Right.
And so nowadays, I think you're seeing much more people able to get into that space and grow in that space.
This is what we talked about at the beginning of the video.
That's why you're going to see those double A studios that focus and narrow in on just like that one solid, really good product. That is where I think the future is going to be for AAA games. And I think that also AAA studios, this is
Okay, we talked about that a little bit earlier, about the potentially merging of what the studio, the definition of like a double A, AAA is.
And the problem now is that residual taste in people's... let's go ahead and just stop right there. People think that their next games are going to be bad because their previous games have been bad. And so there is a reputational damage that happens that exists beyond the lifespan of the game that has problems. And that's effectively what I'm trying to say. And so what I think that we're seeing with Ubisoft and other studios is that they have this reputational damage, this generational reputational damage. Blizzard's another great example of this. And it makes it to where every game that they release is taken with such a massive grain of salt that a lot of people write it off.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. You know what?
They don't even know what it is. Oh, it's a Blizzard game.
See, that's the thing that kind of sucks. And I do think Blizzard has done a lot of they've repaired a lot of their reputation, I think, recently, to be fair. Because, man, I'll tell you, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, compare it to 6 years ago, dude. Compare Blizzard reputation now to 6-7 years ago. If you mention the wrong publisher on Reddit, you'll get downvoted to hell. It's nuts. Yeah. Blizzard has gotten better, right? But it takes so much to repair that reputation.
It's a Ubisoft game.
And like I said, you feel bad for the devs because there are tons of devs who work on a game that did not work on the previous 2, 3, 4, 7 games that studio made, but because of the damage that had been done from the bad reputation of the other games, now the game that the new devs are working on will have it starts at a lower floor because the studio has a bad rep. It sucks. It sucks for the devs. You would think most people, it's just the truth, right? Most people don't really have the understanding of the big picture to see anything beyond that, right? You could have the same team of people. You could have 5 people who are the main people working on a game, work on a game at, let's say, Riot. And you love Riot. Oh, I love Riot. I love Riot. I love Riot. They go to Blizzard. They work on a game at Blizzard. Oh, I hate Blizzard. And now their game sucks, right? Because most people don't know that. Most people don't see it that deep. Or vice versa. Maybe somebody goes to, say, Microsoft Games, right? Makes something or whatever, right? And then you don't like them. Then they go somewhere that you do like, and then this game's gonna be great. But it's the same people working on it. It's crazy.
Of course, it's going to be garbage. And so, newer studios that focus on one product don't necessarily have that reputation, or at least in a lot of cases they don't. And if they do,
it's 100% happening to Bethesda at this moment.
I think that's what happens in some cases. But that's where I think the future is of AAA gaming. I think that they have to narrow down and focus more on a number of individual IPs rather than trying to just get a 20% return on as many things as possible. I think that there is very clearly a market saturation. There's very clearly a market cap. And I think that we're beginning to explore that reality now. And I think that's become evident after about, I'd say 2022, after the COVID level of internet usage and video game usage kind of went back down. And then also it wasn't recovered.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. Happy holidays to you too.
Internet usage and video game usage kind of went back down, and then also it wasn't recovering at the 20% or 10% year-over-year expectations that a lot of tech companies were, getting investments under the expectation of. And so what I think is going to happen is, you're going to have a lot of these AAA studios that just simply can't
Yeah, the COVID boom.
meet the expectations of such a
Big
massive
bubble.
ship. It's like, how easy is it to turn a Titanic versus a Viking longboat, right? And that's why you see small games like Valheim doing a whole lot better than big games like Skull and Bones. And there it is, a quadruple A game, 1A for each player. And so that's what happens. That's where I think things are going to go. And I think the future that we're really going to see is going to be in the indie studios and the AA studios that focus in and fixate on creating one AAA high-quality experience game.
Okay.
Like Path of Exile 2, Stalker 2, Baldur's Gate 3, stuff like that. And I think that's going to be the future of games. And you know what I think? I think that is such a good thing. That's
Yeah, I think it is
amazing,
too.
Great thing, because those studios have a much better understanding of what the players want, and I'm a player, and that's what I want. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I thought I'd make this video and talk about this topic because you know, I see a lot of people bringing it up very regularly, and I wanted to give my 2 cents. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
There you go. Good video. Yeah, I mean, I would agree in a lot of ways actually with this, and I do think there's a lot of nuance to it.